Cashflow Diary Podcast, episode 156.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other Cashflow Diary podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, Jay Massey.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast. I am your host, Jay Massey, and guess what we're going to talk about today? I know, you're wondering. That's right, it's cash flow. So here's the thing. When it comes to creating a business and building cash flow and making things happen, at the end of the day, you only have three ways to make it happen. You can either you can increase the number of customers that you have. So you can just go get more customers. You can increase the frequency with which those customers absolutely purchase, or you can, increase how much each customer is actually spending. Those are your choices. It's one of those three things. Now, today's guest is an expert in increasing customer loyalty. And another way of looking at that is getting them to come back more frequently and to buy from you time and time again. And if you ask me, as a real estate investor, the one thing I am definitely concerned about as a landlord is making sure that they keep coming back time and time again to pay the rent. So I'm eager to hear what Noah Fleming has to say. Now, you may not know Noah, but you probably do. He's a thought leader in strategic marketing and customer loyalty. He's been the trusted source for coaching and consulting for thousands of owners, executives, and individuals. And he's consistently helped clients dramatically increase sales, multiply their profits, and maximize customer value. Now, see, that's that last word I like, maximize customer value. Now, he's recently released a new book called Evergreen, which is, again, another word that I want to dig into to find out more about. So help me welcome Noah Fleming. Noah, you there?
I'm here. Thanks, Jay. Thanks for that wonderful intro.
You're welcome. I'm glad that you're here. Now, before we get down to business, there's the standard question that I ask all the time, especially the first one. I look at today's entrepreneurs a lot like yesterday's superheroes. And, if you think about superheroes, they fly around, they dress up funny, they wear, tights and capes and boots and masks and save people. That's kind of what they do. They get dressed up to do their work. And that's kind of what entrepreneurs do. We save people. Occasionally we get dressed up, even if it's in bunny slippers, it's okay. And we go out there to provide people products and services that we believe improve their life and save them in some way. However, every superhero has that alter ego or first identity, etc. And what we really want to know is, before you were, super author, business consultant, saving thousands of entrepreneurs from themselves, who is Noah Fleming?
So, Jay, I came out of university and college years ago, and I had this world that the world was my oyster. I had followed that traditional path, and I went out into the working world, and it took me a year to find a job. And when I finally found that job, I started as a marketing representative for the city where I lived. And no joke, maybe 3 hours into my first day, I realized I had made a big mistake. and I realized that, I had fooled myself into believing that was the path I needed to follow. But I had grown up as an entrepreneur. I had always been starting companies and starting businesses and always trying to put money into my pocket. One of the lines that my father used to say to me was, write your own paycheck. He worked in a factory his whole life. And he always used to tell me, his paycheck was determined by someone else. I should determine my paycheck. And he always stressed that to me. And so I always did things. But then I thought, no, you know what? I have to follow the path that everybody tells me I need to follow. So literally first day in my job. I realized I made a mistake. I went home that night and I told my wife, I'm quitting my job. And she said, what do you mean you're quitting? She said, what do you mean you're quitting your job? It just took you a year to get your job. And she's not very risk tolerant. As I said, I've been an entrepreneur, so I'm very open to risk. I'm open. I can thrive on risk. But she said, tell you what, if you can earn the same amount of income or more for 6 months, then I'll trust you in quitting your job. I'll trust whatever you do. And so I said, okay, that's fair enough. That's a fair deal. So 6 months to the day, I walked into my first job out of school. And I told my boss that I would be leaving. And that was in 2005, and I haven't been back since. So there's a big jump between 2005 and 2015, but that was the start of it, where I walked away from my first corporate job. And I started doing what I knew how to do, and that was to help others, like you said, to provide value to others, to help people grow. And so that took me from working with really small mom and pop shop businesses to working with entrepreneurs all over the world to now working with substantially large organizations. And so that's brought me to this point where I've got my new book out, and lots of great things are happening.
Indeed. Right now, I'm just trying to imagine 3 hours in, dude, you didn't even make it to the first lunch break. You're just like, I'm ready to go. I mean, you didn't even get a chance to get that far, and you're like, I'm out of here. I'm ready to go. That's somewhat comical to me, especially you spent all that time. So here comes the question then. If you had that instinct, why did you even follow through to go find out? Why did you even go down that road? I mean, what was so motivating? What was so pushing you in that direction anyway?
Well, I mean, two things. Even though my father always told me to write my own paycheck, he also was a firm believer in a great education, right? And getting that education, getting that degree. But the second big issue was the myth of security, of safety, the myth that the corporate ladder was meant to be climbed, the myth that was the route that everybody else followed. So, I'm foolish to not follow that, because now I'm a big boy, right? Now I've actually got to enter the working world. I'm not just doing little side businesses or entrepreneurial ventures on the side. Now it's time to get serious. And so that was the myth I bought into. And as I said, I realized very quickly that I had made a mistake, and thankfully I was able to trust my intuition and my gut and make that move.
Yeah. Well, I would say, I hear this concept of getting serious and whatnot, and for everybody listening, I would say it gets serious the moment you say, I am not going to work a job, because now you got to really have a plan. That's when it gets serious. That's awesome. Okay, so I guess as you're going on this journey, so you're going, hey, I'm going to quit. Where did you get the inspiration of what it is or how you were going to save people, so to speak? I mean, it's one thing to say, I hate my job and I'm going to do something differently, but where did you pull that, here's what I'm going to do that's going to be of value to people? Where did that come from?
Great question. So before that, and during my time in school, I was, as I mentioned, I was working with really small mom and pop shops, businesses in the town where I lived, helping them with very simple marketing tasks. And so I knew I was good at that. I went into the marketing world. That was my first job. So I knew I was good at marketing. So in 2005, the internet was still really, really young. You could put up an ad and you could drive traffic to it with Google AdWords with no competition. So I said, I'm going to take my services and offer them to anyone in the world. And my wife laughed at me and she said, well, what do you mean? And I said, I'm going to build a simple website where I'm going to offer advice to people for X amount of dollars per month. And so again, my wife laughed and said, okay, good luck with that. And a few weeks after I set that up, somebody paid me. Some guy from Australia all of a sudden submitted a recurring revenue subscription of $30 a month in which he could ask me questions and I would answer. And I looked at this and went, oh, holy smokes, right? And I wanted to do And I made it a goal when that first guy gave me $30. My goal was that I would never let that $30 stop. And so retention and the idea of loyalty became such a strong focus to me. Well, all of a sudden, one person in Australia became 10 people, and then 10 became 50, and 50 became 100, and then 100 became 500. And so eventually I had a whole community of people paying me for really, text-based advice on how to do things a little bit better, or to review ads they were doing, to review their marketing plans. Very simple stuff, right? Which got me into consulting at a very early age on a very small level. Now I do much more high-level consulting with much larger organizations on far more sophisticated issues. But that was really how it started. And I made sure that I got really good at customer retention. I got really good at maximizing the value of that customer. So if anybody gave me $1, I never wanted that dollar to stop.
Right. Yeah. My precious dollar. Yes, I get it. It's totally now. Well, here's the question: is I mean, for somebody listening right now, they're just probably like, hold on. You mean someone all the way in Australia actually paid you money and you turned that into a business? That makes no sense. And I'm sure they would have been very similar to your wife. Like, good luck with that. But that's a real and viable economic way to go out there and make business today.
Sure. I mean, look, there's you can start a community on the web about anything, and chances are, if you've got great value to offer somebody, there's somebody out there that's willing to pay for that. And so, again, in 2005, that was a little bit easier to do than it is today. There was a little less competition out there.
You could say that again.
And so, being sort of in the right place in the right time at that point, I was able to capitalize on that, and that. But what that did was that didn't turn into the business that I kept. I don't have that business anymore. In fact, I walked away. That was another step where I went home and I had this other discussion with my wife, where 4 or 5 years after that, we'd paid off our mortgage of our first house. And then I went home one day and said, okay, now I'm going to walk away from all these people paying me $30 a month. She said, what do you mean? I said, she had gotten used to a certain lifestyle. And I said, well, I think I've given these people all I can give them. And so now I need to take another step. So I closed down that community and I walked away from a substantial amount of recurring revenue every month to start the next venture. And so again, though, she trusted me in that. And, there was a building process again, but I'm a firm believer that we just live in a time with such great opportunity that if you're open to seeing the opportunity and open to trying something and taking a risk and taking advantage of all this great opportunity, then you can make it work. And so that's sort of how I live my life at this point, Jay.
So, okay, let me guess. So by the time we're done here, you're going to change your mind and do something new, or what do we how long do we have before?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I as I mentioned, I got really good at customer retention and really good at loyalty.
Right.
And then I realized that I could really help companies with this on a much larger level. So as much as there was some sort of shifts in what I was doing, the core of developing that expertise in that area of focus has been the same since 2005. It's just morphed and taken on new directions. And so I've sort of let myself drift with those directional changes and make sure that I'm fluid enough to recognize when a shift is happening. So to recognize when it was time to write this book, for example, or to go out and get a book deal, that was just sort of the next evolution. Now I'm doing a lot more speaking at different events and conferences, and that's sort of the next evolution. I'm getting inquiries from, again, much larger organizations now dealing with these same issues. And so, you just have to be willing to ride the wave. And sometimes I think you also have to be willing to let go of something that might hold you back.
Indeed. Agreed 1000%. Now, being in I definitely want to spend some time diving into the book, but before we get there, me personally, so now, everyone listening, Jay's going to be a little selfish and start asking some questions for himself here, because in the landlord space, The one thing that I'm always thinking about is, keeping turnover low, making sure that the tenant, pays the rent again and again. And I tell people all the time, look, they say to me, I don't want to sell anything. I just want to be a landlord. I'm like, you don't understand. Landlording is you're selling the same thing every 30 days. Period. And you've got to make sure you deliver consistently in all of those ways. I'm curious to know, just maybe if it's real estate specific, that's great. If it doesn't necessarily have to be, I would love to know, like, what is Noah's top 10 ways to produce and foster customer loyalty? I would love to know something like that.
Well, you're giving an interesting example, right? A landlord-tenant relationship is I've never been a landlord. I've been a tenant for a short time, but I'm going to go out. I'm going to change the sort of direction there and say that it's a little bit different relationship than a customer relationship. However, you can learn from the ways that companies would seek to improve customer loyalty. And the first thing that comes to my mind is be a good landlord, right? There's a lot of bad landlords and there's a lot of bad tenants, just like there's bad customers.
We're not going to talk about bad tenants. Keep going. Don't tell them that. They might not want to do real estate ever again. It's all good. It's all good.
But that's really the first thing that comes to mind is to not treat it like an investment, to not treat it like a business, but to recognize that you're dealing with real people with real emotions. I often tell a lot of my friends in the real estate business that they don't understand that buying a piece of real estate is the most emotionally engaging decision that somebody might ever make in their entire life, right? Buying a house, signing a mortgage paper. And I think sometimes realtors or people in that industry, they take that for granted. So I think that's the first thing, is to realize that you're dealing with real people and real emotions, and being aware of that, and being what's the right word here? Being careful to being caring to that and understanding to that. And I think there's too many people out there that are just worried about the investment, just making sure the check clears. The check has to clear. That's important. But if you treat people like humans, they're going to be far more open and willing to make sure that you have the check on time. It's a relationship business, right? And far too often it's looked at as an investment business. And while you make money from the investment, you have to develop and nurture and care for the assets. And the assets very often are the people or the customers. And I think that's just something that we're far too neglectful of.
You know what, Noah? You may not know this or not, but you'd make an excellent landlord, because that's exactly the mantra that's the slight we have to take in order to make properties work. It's so the property matters, but the people matter more. And our mission has always been to provide clean, safe, affordable housing to people that need it when it matters most. And if we fulfill on that in all the aspects, what ends up happening is exactly what you're talking about, which I totally enjoy. What would you say, though? Because when you're out there helping people, from the small business owner to the larger business owner, they're all experiencing similar issues when it comes to loyalty. I mean, when you've got the competition, I know for me, here's how I know how I shop a lot of times. I will go to the store, like a retail store, for example, and what I do this everywhere except Apple, which is kind of interesting. I don't do this there, but I do it everywhere else. I go to the retail store, find the item, then I go look it up on Amazon, and 9 times out of 10, it's cheaper there, and then I go buy it. So it's kind of interesting that that's the case. But with the internet and the competition and the availability of information, how on earth is a company to even have a shot at producing loyalty when it feels like everything that they're doing, everyone else is doing too?
Well, so again, another great question. One of the things that I teach is that you're not going to get everybody. So Amazon is the largest retailer on the planet, I believe. Right? Actually, I believe Walmart might be ahead. Amazon is probably the largest online retailer on the planet. I talk a lot about Amazon from a customer loyalty standpoint because they have some of the most loyal customers on the planet. And It's not because of price. There's a number of price is part of it, but Amazon does truly try and build that relationship with the people that fit their sort of ideal customer profile. So Amazon doesn't care that a price shopper might not become loyal because they're going to get them anyways. But there's something really interesting that Amazon does, which I talk about in Evergreen. Often if you go to the Amazon front page, there's these handwritten letters from Jeff Bezos. And very often they're loaded with things that might be provocative, things that might express his viewpoints a little bit more, things that might turn some people off. And what I say in Evergreen is Jeff knows that this isn't just cutesy marketing. It's not just something. He's actually making a connection with people who buy into Amazon's core values, their core beliefs. He's connecting with them on a one-to-one level. So he doesn't care about the people. Well, he does. Let me rephrase that. He doesn't necessarily care that the wrong people might be turned off for him because he's going to get them anyways. But what he wants to do is make sure he develops a connection with the right people. So it's the same thing with businesses. You're not going to get everybody, but as long as you're ensuring that you're making a strong, concerted effort to connect and resonate and develop relationships with the right people, then you can build strong customer loyalty. So I give examples in the book of companies from every field, a tire store, for example, that sells tires to people, but has an incredibly strong, loyal customer base that in turn generates referrals, generates word of mouth marketing. Customers continue to shop there, so they have great customer lifetime value. I give examples of guitar retailers. I give examples of toy companies, restaurants, big and small. And so there's companies out there that are doing it. The key is to know who those people are and how to connect with them and to ensure that you're doing those things on a regular basis. Day in and day out marketing is really what I call the key to customer loyalty.
Got it. Makes perfect sense. Now, for the sake of everyone, I just want to make sure, because I know recently I ran into this term and I had to learn it. And I tend to abbreviate things. So when I call it CLTV, and for most of the realtor or real estate related people, they could be thinking I'm thinking combined or cumulative loan to value, things of that nature. But that's not what I'm talking about. But you said it. You said customer lifetime value. Could you unpack that a little bit so that we can have an understanding of, and most importantly, how you see it, how you calculate it, what that means and really why it's important?
Are you tired of letting good cash flow generating ideas go to waste? Go to cashflowdiary.com/ready to apply for a complimentary, yes, that means free, one-on-one breakthrough session. Take action now. Go to cashflowdiary.com/ready. Again, that's cashflowdiary.com/ready. Before we get back to today's episode of the Cashflow Diary podcast, your host, Jay Massey, has some important insights to share with you.
All right, guys. So hopefully you're learning a lot about the many different numbers and metrics that can come into your entire business. And I know you're like, Jay, how am I going to use these? And when is this going to happen? At some point, you're going to evolve your business to where it is metric driven. And these are the numbers that you're going to need. I mean, you're going to need each and every one of them. Anyway, as a reminder, keep leaving the written reviews. We are still trying to get to 100 reviews by July 4th. I know we can do that together, guys. Let's make sure that we do that. Thank you for those of you who have entered and left the written review. I'm definitely very grateful for those. Let's keep that momentum going that we've got. But speaking of momentum, let's get back to the interview.
Sure. So in many companies, the concept of customer lifetime value is really sort of seen as the holy grail of, what they know about their customers. So in the most basic sense for people listening, if you run an ice cream shop and a customer comes 10 times, and every time they spend $10 and the average customer does the same thing, then your customer lifetime value is about $100, right? That's a very simple example. It's a number that's used by companies for them to understand what the average customer is going to be worth, how much they can spend to get that customer, and how much they can spend to care for them. The biggest problem, And the biggest problem with the concept of customer lifetime value, there's a few things. One is going back to our discussion about landlords and tenants. Using an average number to make all your sales and marketing decisions is a mistake. I don't believe that there's any average customers. You have real people. So lumping all your customers into this big blob that's used to make marketing decisions is a mistake. The second mistake is that companies don't really understand what the lifetime of their customer is. So is it an actual lifetime? Is it 6 months? Is it 12 months? Is it a year? See, most companies don't do the calculation to decide when should the customer be buying with us again. Is the customer still a customer? So in a restaurant, for example, is if I eat at a restaurant today and I don't go back for a year from now, am I still a customer? Most would say yes, right? If they've got me on a mailing list, then I'm still a customer. But the reality is I'm not. I'm not still a customer. In fact, I have to be one again. So for the restaurant, they need to understand that their customer lifetime value might be 30 days, it might be 60 days, but it's probably not much more than that. So every company needs to know, what is the lifetime for our customer? What is the lifetime that we should see people again? Real estate is a little bit different, right? Because people don't buy a house every 60, 90, 120, 365 days. So the lifetime in real estate, for example, is very different. So everybody needs to think about, what is the lifetime for my customer? And then how do we bring them back to ensure that we're extending that, to ensure that we're extending the value of that? Does that make sense, Jay?
Yeah, it makes sense. And right now I'm thinking that Starbucks is measuring that in minutes between customer visits. But yes, totally. Now, I guess the interesting thing that you brought to that you're bringing to my attention is, if you said you don't want to lump, there's no such thing as the average customer. So are you like breaking out, one type of customer and figuring out a number for that type of customer versus another, like, females of, between this age and this age, and males between this age and this age? This is, what do you, help me understand?
Yeah. So again, another brilliant question, and something that I break down in Evergreen tremendously, is that you probably have different subsets of customers that have different demographic status, different psychographic status. And so what I try and do from a very simplistic standpoint, for companies that don't have massive analytics teams, and companies that don't have these scientists sifting through mounds of big data and going through and finding every little subset, you can break them down into very simple groups. So you might find that grandmothers over 60, for example, are your sort of ideal core market where you should be focusing your marketing dollars. You might find that one place where you advertise or market your company brings in a different type of customer. So knowing that is key. The issue that most companies run into is that they have one mailing list and they have one group of customers. And so everybody gets the same message all the time. And it's hard to try and break that apart. It's hard for companies to see how they would actually manage that. But if you start to chunk it down, you can do that. So for example, if I sold guitars, I might break out left-handed guitarists. And then anytime I've got a left-handed guitar promotion, I only want to email those people. It's really simple. You just want to target the right message to the right person at the right time. And if we group them all together with that big sort of average blob that I mentioned, then we're not really marketing effectively. And we can never market effectively if we're doing that.
Okay, now so that just maybe I'm splitting hairs here. Is it market effectively or market efficiently? Which is it? Really?
Well, I think it's both. Both. If we wanted efficient is to have the one big mailing list and send everything to everybody and not worry about it. It's to have that one sort of core customer that we try and go after. Marketing effectively and marketing to maximize value, to maximize customer value, is about knowing where to dedicate your marketing dollars, who to spend more money on than others. Some customers are going to be higher value customers. In turn, those customers probably are a little bit more deserving of your attention, or perhaps even marketing dollars. Are there lower value customers where you should be trying to increase frequency? So just breaking up all those different subsets. You talked about the 3 ways to grow a business, right? Well, one of the subsets is the customers who are less frequent.
Right.
Their marketing should be a lot different than the customer that comes in every day. And Starbucks is a great example of that. Starbucks sends more offers to the less loyal customers because they know the loyal customers are coming. And so the less loyal customers are more often going to get promotions sent to their phone or sent to their email, because what they're trying to do is they simply want to increase frequency with you. And they know that once they get you to a certain point where it becomes habitual, then they can stop, they can lay off a little bit and they can then focus on the next segment. And again, any business can do this, right? Any small business can break apart their customers and figure out when was the last time we saw them, what is unique about them, who is at risk of leaving us, who hasn't been here for a while. These are all the types of things that make money.
Huh. So you're saying even if I don't have a recurring revenue product, which is one of the reasons by the way, I enjoy real estate. It's a recurring revenue product. You're saying this still can apply in some way, shape, or form.
Absolutely. I mean, if you own the, let's try and think of an example here.
I was thinking of a clothing store is what I was actually thinking. Clothing store, but a restaurant restaurant, see, it has that consumption factor. You got to eat again. I don't necessarily have to buy another shirt for a while. That's
right. So again, if we know that you've visited today and we don't see you for a year, should we be marketing to you the same way? And the reality is most companies are, but the reality is there's probably a better way. So the local salon, for example, or the barber, the same thing. It's still a recurring revenue product. They still need to get their hair done, right? If you want to increase the size of your business or grow your business, going back to the three ways, you get them to shop more. You get them to do more business with you more often. So why not treat everything like a recurring revenue product? Why not treat everything like a subscription model? Why not treat everything like a faucet that you never want to turn off?
Oh, you got that right. Flood, please, flood everywhere. So I guess what what we're coming to then is here's what's going through my head. When you get for the 12 people that still get the Sunday paper, there's one advertisement in it that's going to all of those individuals. I mean, that's wide circulation, wide distribution. I'm thinking of things like television and these other marketing mediums. Doesn't that violate everything you just said?
Well, so there's a really interesting book right now called The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, and he gives some big examples. And the big example is Target in there. But even though you think everybody's getting the same flyer from Target, even though you think your neighbor got the same thing in that wide circulation, they are in fact personalizing it for almost everybody. They have entire warehouses that are capturing customer data. They have a customer ID for almost every customer. So they know, the story in the book is that Target got a little bit creepy because they knew when women were pregnant before their own families did. And they knew that based on buying and shopping habits. Again, there's more effective ways for smaller companies to utilize these sort of similar approaches just by looking at what their customer base is really looks like. Start tracking a little bit of data. When are we seeing these people? Who haven't we seen in a long time? Who stopped doing business with us, and do we know why? And these are the types of things that I help my clients look at.
Wow, that's scary. To know the thought process that they would know, hey, they're pregnant. Cool, let's send them diaper offers. Yeah.
Well, in the Target example became a bit of a controversy, and it sort of concerned a lot of people that the whole concept of big data and companies having more information on us than ever before, and it's increasing at an unfathomable rate. But they can legitimately predict, when a woman, for example, is even thinking about becoming pregnant, just based on her purchasing habits of things like prenatal vitamins. And so then the flyer that shows up at that person's door changes. And what they did to reduce the creepiness factor, which is discussed in the book, is they realized that it was too creepy. So they had
Yeah, a little bit.
they had to mask the ads. And so they had to put things like diapers in between two lawnmowers, right? So it looks random, but it was very specific strategic marketing, and there is some great discussion in the book where Target executives wrote the author and said, a lot of his reporting was incorrect, but great book, highly recommended, a really fascinating thing to read about.
Got it. Okay, well, speaking of books, let's talk about yours. First of all, the title got my attention. The title gets my attention. It says Evergreen, and in this new world where I'm learning to do things online, etc., everybody says make it evergreen. I'm like, cool. I just like to make it, let alone evergreen. I would love to understand more about the title choice, and most importantly, what's inside. What are we going to learn?
So the title choice actually is there's a story at the beginning of the book where I talk about a walk through the forest on my honeymoon, shortly around that time where I had just left my job, and what I was telling you about, we had finally had a little cash in our pockets about a year after we got married, so we went on a late honeymoon, and we were walking through a forest, and all those ideas of the people I was working with were just sort of staring me right in the face. There was this big metaphor right there that great companies were evergreen. Great companies seem to thrive under any condition. So what was the difference? What was the difference where some companies are like deciduous trees, where every winter it's cold, every winter they drop their leaves, every winter it's a struggle? Or why were some companies more, like barren trees, where they could never get the growth, they could never get things off the ground? And so that's what I break down in the first half of the book. I start to show you what are the commonalities of the evergreen companies. And again, I try to give examples covering a broad range of industries and company sizes, from the solo professional, the solo entrepreneur, right up to the big companies like Apple and Amazon. And then the second half of the book really breaks down the tactical stuff we were just discussing. So how do you actually take that phrase where, one of the things customer service experts like to say to us is it's far easier to keep an existing customer than it is to get a new one, right? I think that's the worst business advice in the world. In fact, I think it's the worst piece of business advice ever given, because they never go beyond that. They never tell us how to do that. And so that's the second half of Evergreen. Evergreen is how you actually do that, how you actually take the existing customer and increase revenues, generate referrals, bring back lost customers, understanding how to really do a customer lifetime value calculation with your customers, which customers you should fire and why. And that's really the second half of the book.
Yes. Firing customers. Done that before. All right. Now, that's always a liberating day, by the way. It's always a liberating day. Now, I guess when it comes down to it, it sounds like a lot of what you're saying could be applied into any business vertical. Would that be correct? Absolutely. So let me rephrase. What would be the most difficult vertical to apply this in your opinion?
That's a tough one. I mean, again, I've really tried to cover the gamut here, but these concepts, the idea of maximizing customer value, they're really applicable in B2B businesses, business to business, business to consumer, online, offline. Again, small entrepreneurs, right up to the big companies. I think it's applicable everywhere. If you have a customer, you should be doing whatever it takes to keep that customer. And as smaller companies, I mean, the onus is on us far more than it is for big companies like Comcast, for example, who can treat people like garbage, but it doesn't matter because every day they drive in a million new customers. So it doesn't hurt companies like that. But for everybody else, right, it really does matter, right? And so everybody else, it really does play a part. So all these things are applicable. And if you read Evergreen and you get one little tip out of there that changes the way you treat a customer, or changes how you respond to a customer complaint, or helps you understand a little bit better how to send your marketing out to potential prospects or existing customers, then I think it's worth its weight in gold.
Now, is there any way we could get you to apply some of these principles to, say, the Department of Motor Vehicles, because that would be really awesome. I'm just saying, because they don't seem to respond to my complaints at all. I don't think they care, and that's not good.
Yeah, and they might not, right? I mean, it's sort of the same thing. First of all, you've got a lot of employees who probably also don't care to be there, but there's really no motivation for them to do any better. Just like we have these rogue Comcast employees that send out vulgar things on people's bills because they call and they cause a ruckus. These employees don't care about the larger company. They don't care what really happens, and they don't care about you. And so that's a big problem. And it's like a virus in many companies.
Wow. Now, before we wind down too much, there was an article that you recently wrote, and it had one of my favorite words, most importantly, favorite board games mentioned. And if you are a real estate person, you've probably played Monopoly at least once. And I just, by the way, it got my attention because it says nobody ever won Monopoly any other way, which, well, I always like to win. And then you're mentioning Monopoly, and I'm like, how do I have to win Monopoly? Because I know there's going to be a number of people who are interested in it. You care to summarize a little bit what they might learn if they catch that article in your blog?
Sure. That was one of the things I do is I look for metaphors whenever I create content, and I just happened to be staring at the Monopoly box, trying to think about what I was going to blog about that day. And when you think about the concept of CRM, which is customer relationship management, there was something there between that and Monopoly. I was doing a webinar for Salesforce, who's the largest CRM company on the planet, and what I believe is that you don't manage the customer anymore. You don't manage the customer conversation. These days, it's a two-way conversation. We know that the web has created new channels for people. And so I don't think it's about closing the sale. It's not the end game. It's not trying to win Monopoly by going around the board as many times as you can. The people that always win Monopoly, they develop and own the assets. They build the properties. They build the relationship like you would with a customer. So in that article, I just said, you don't close the sale. It's not an end point. That's simply the start of the next process. It's the start of the relationship. And you need to treat all business like that, that if you're simply trying to close the sale, you're missing out. So in the article, I referred to it as, it's not CRM, it's CRL, it's customer relationship lifestyle.
Yeah, I totally enjoyed that. And that's the part that I like. I like the way, well, obviously I like Monopoly, and I like the way you think and the way that we can apply all of these techniques and these thought processes. I mean, it should invade nearly every process of the business in some way, shape, or form, which is great, in my opinion. Now, for those that have listened this far and probably have said to themselves, I would like to find out more information from this guy. Noah, what's going to be the best way for us to let us stalk you online and track you down?
Well, the common places are my website, which is noahfleming.com, NOAHFLEMING, Twitter, which is at Noah Fleming. And then, of course, I would urge your listeners to check out Evergreen. They can get it from Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Audible, however they like to read and consume books. It's available everywhere.
Got it. Now, as we get to the final question, I gotta ask. There's probably someone right now who's listening, and especially after listening to you, they probably felt, they go, you know what, I can do this, or my business can make it, or hey, we should do that, or they're considering for the first time putting on that superhero outfit, saying, you know what, I'm gonna save people. Gosh darn it, I can do what this guy's talking about. My idea is great. However, there's still a little bit of hesitation. They're still feeling just possibly like, maybe, I don't know if it's going to work. And, I would like to, but what if I don't make it? What would you have to say to that person right now?
Well, as entrepreneurs, we hear a lot about the fear of failure. right? And it's something that a lot of entrepreneurs talk about, is that they fear failing, they fear they're not going to make it, they fear their idea isn't going to work. But the fact is that a lot of the fear of failure is really just procrastination, and it's procrastination to not try, to not take a chance, to not do it. Any of this stuff can be done on the side. Anything can be tested. Anything can be done with a couple hours one night or on a Saturday. Everybody's got the extra time. It's a matter of just trying it. And you never know what's going to stick, but you'll never know if you don't do it. And so I'm not afraid to put anything out there. I'm not afraid to say anything that, if it sounds good in my head for even a minute, I'll put it out there and then I move on. The fear, I work with a mentor very closely, and he talks about that when you're 80% ready, you move. When you're 80% ready, you go. If you're constantly striving for 100% or perfection, you'll never do it. And I mean, look at the best example of that is Windows, right?
Oh, man.
Microsoft launched Windows back in the day. They were probably 20% ready. And I wouldn't even think Windows is at 60% yet at this point, but I'm an Apple guy, so I have to say that.
Yeah, well, no, yeah, I'm an Apple guy too, and I agree with you 1,000%. Like, really, when you think about, that's a great idea right there. Just think, all of you out there who are going, but I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. If you remember that the Windows product, just think about where they are today and where they would be if they had waited until it was perfect.
You can't wait. I mean, you just have to move, and it's the 80% rule, right? When you're 80% ready, you go.
Yeah, or well, rather when you think you're 80% ready, you may not even. You may think you're 80% there, and then you go, oh, well, maybe I wasn't, but that's okay. You went and you began to make things happen. Well, sir, I definitely appreciate the time that you have taken to be with us and invest here with the Cashflow Diary audience.
Well, Jay, I appreciate you having me. That was a fabulous interview. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what it's time to do. It's time for you to move at the speed of instruction, which today absolutely means go check out the book, Evergreen. Go pick it up, because you heard more than one thing today that you're like, you know what, I should do that, or that definitely would help me as I go out there to build my business and grow cash flow. Remember, there's only 3 ways to make it happen: more customers, make them come back more frequently, or increase the amount they're spending every time they walk through the door. And now you know that all of that can be achieved with loyalty. It's been fun talking to you guys today, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time.